This is Join Us in France, episode 480. 480. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we take a conversational journey through the beauty, culture, and flavors of France. Today, I bring you a trip report with Christian Chauret. I'm not sure how to say his name. Chauret? Perhaps Chauret. Christian Chauret, or Christian Chauret if you're French, about his hike on the Sentier Cathare in Occitanie on the GR 367. So, that's one of the grandes randonnées, one of the big trails that you can walk in France and throughout Europe, as a matter of fact. One of the most wonderful things you can do in life is set some time away from your regular life and take a hike, a long walk. I'm not going to make the joke about take a hike. Christian did something a lot of us dream about doing. And I know you're going to learn a lot about this episode because it's just a wonderful thing to do. This podcast is supported by donors and listeners who buy my tours and services, including my itinerary consult service, my GPS self-guided tours of Paris on the Voice Map app, or take a day trip with me around the southwest of France in my electric car. And you can browse all of that at my boutique, joinusinfrance.com/boutique. Registration for the bootcamp in May 2024 is now closed. I'm saving a couple of seats for the significant others of bootcamp members who might decide to join us after all. That's happened last year and it's happening this year again. So I'm just saving a couple just in case. We're going to have a grand time, you guys. For the magazine part of the podcast, after my chat with Christian today, I'll discuss the cities in France that get the most highly ratings by French people, by French standard. Not to go on vacation particularly, but to live, even though many of these towns are also wonderful for visitors. Bonjour, Christian Chauret, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie. Merci. Thank you.
Wonderful to talk to you about your hike of the Sentier Cathare, which also goes by the name of the GR 367, so GR 367 in the Occitanie, so the region where I live. Tell me, what inspired you to do this hike, and when did your trip take place?
The trip took place in late May and early June, so in 2023. What inspired me, I have always done a lot of hiking here in the US and Canada, and I've done some backpacking as well. So I think like many people during COVID, I was thinking about doing a trip to Europe. I've been to Europe before. I'm French Canadian, so I have some French roots. And then I start to think, I haven't seen much of France. I've been a little bit in Alsace and a little bit in Paris many years ago. I thought the south of France would be really interesting. I was thinking about one of the Compostelle, the Voie de Saint-Jacques ways. And then, of course, I found your podcast and I listened to many episodes. And you had 2 episodes on the Cathare's ways, or the Cathare's rather. And so I was very intrigued by that. And I started to do a little bit of research. And that's when I found out about the actual hiking path, the Cathare's way. And I thought, well, that sounds just about right. I can do it in a week or 2. In the end, I decided to do it in 1 week. And there's a lot of history, a lot of scenery. So that was just sort of the perfect trip to plan. So I got really excited about it.
Yeah. So we had done 2 other episodes about the Cathares. 387, it was about Cathare beliefs and lifestyle, and 388 about the crusade against the Cathares. And so perhaps that kind of put a bug in your ear or something?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what got me interested.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the country. And so you've done other hiking. How would you compare the level of difficulty compared to other places where you've hiked?
It's definitely strenuous. I've done here in the US, I've done a lower part of the Appalachian Trail, the famous AT Trail, which is also very strenuous. So I would compare it a little bit to that. So lots of pretty big hills. I mean, you're not in the Rockies or in the Alps, but it's still, at the end of the day, you're tired. You're very tired.
And you can count on between 15 and 20 kilometers a day, more or less?
About that, yeah. 15 to 20 depends on your age and your physical abilities, but that's a good average, 15 to 20 kilometers. So 10 to 12 miles, 15 miles at most, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You did this with a friend of yours?
Yes. So it's a long story, but my wife and I were planning to go to Spain. So we start to plan a trip to Spain. And then I told her I would really like to do this hike in France. She was fine with that. So I was planning the trip to Spain and then the hike to France. And my friend found out that I was doing the French part on my own. And he kind of reached out and he said, do you want a trail buddy? Do you want a companion on the trail? And so I said, sure, then let's do it together. So we met in Barcelona and took the train to Perpignan, and then we started from there.
Right. So you actually started walking from Perpignan?
No. We took a bus from Perpignan to the small town of Vingros, which is actually not on the Sentier Cathare. It's a little bit south of it. So we took sort of a secondary trail, a smaller trail, for about, 3 or 4 miles. And that brought us to one of the first castles.
Okay.
And then we were on the Sentier Cathare from there.
Okay.
There was no easy way by public transportation to get to sort of where we wanted to start. So
right. Because, if you do the whole thing, it starts in Port-la-Nouvelle on the coast, and it goes all the way to Foix, which is in the Pyrenees. So it's 145 kilometers or so if you do the whole thing.
I think it's more than that. I think it's 220 kilometers, I think.
Oh, okay.
So we ended up doing a segment sort of in the middle, if you will. We started maybe a third of the way, and we ended up, maybe a third or so before the end, before Foix.
Right. And you did a day hike also one of the days, and we'll go into details about that in a second. But yeah, there were Cathars all over this area. They obviously walked. This was the way that people got around. It's impossible to say this was the one and only way. They took any route they wanted to. They often had to flee. So they probably went over the mountain, because this is pretty much a east to west path, which you could also do west to east, I'm sure. But they also went south into Spain, where persecutions were not as prevalent for some of the time anyway. So
right. There's actually a second hiking trail called the Sentier des Bons Hommes, which is GR 107, I think. And that one goes into Spain. So it goes north-south from Montsegur to some of the towns in Spain.
Mm-hmm. So was this completely itinerant? So did you carry all your stuff? Did you stop at hotels? Did you have camping gear?
We did not camp. So we carried all our stuff being clothes and toiletries, but we stayed in hostels and bed and breakfast, brought a little bit of food along, but basically we weren't camping. That's kind of what I like about hiking like that in France. There's a lot of little inns every 20, 25 kilometers. So you don't have to bring your tent, and you don't have to rough it too much.
Right. Yeah, so you took this hike late May, early June 2023.
Correct.
And so I assume that most of the places, the stores, the inns, the restaurants, most of that was open for the season anyway, right?
The inns definitely were open. The restaurants, we ran into some, just minor issues. We were in a lot of small towns or villages, maybe most of them with 3 or 4 restaurants. And in the evening, maybe 1 out of 3 would be open. So you had to kind of learn along the way that not to count that all the restaurants would be open.
Yeah.
I think they take a turn. They alternate. Like one night, one restaurant is open. The next night it's the next one. And the Google map is not very good at telling you which one is open. So
yeah, well, it's not, there's nothing wrong with Google Maps. It's just that they don't tell Google Maps the details, because it would change constantly. I mean, honestly, some of these people, they just, they're just friends. Like, okay, I got to take off. You open, that sort of thing.
But anyway, other than that, yeah, things were open. So that
you
was
never
fun.
went hungry.
No, we did not.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I gained some weight.
Did you encounter any major difficulties? Were there huge surprises, things that kind of caused some trouble?
No, not really. I don't think so. We had a very good map, but I guess we didn't look at the topography as well as we should have. So some days the hills were a little bit bigger than we expected. So but I would say that's part of the fun of, not knowing fully what to expect all the time. Once we got done with the hike because we took a couple of days off after hiking, on one of the days there was a train strike So we were a little bit worried about that, but in the end, we were able to take just like some buses and that was fine. They weren't on strike. So that was the only thing that was maybe just a minor issue, but it really didn't have any impact on us.
Yes, and I'm sure that in this part of the country, the fact that you are fluent in French really helped.
Yeah, it didn't hurt. Yeah, that's for
yes,
sure.
I'm sure most people don't switch to English immediately, right?
No, they don't. But my friend spoke a little bit of French, but mostly English, of course. And I don't think he had any major issues. So people were quite friendly and willing to help him.
Very good. Okay. So why don't you take it day by day and tell us more about the details of each day?
Okay. So as I said, the first morning we were in Perpignan, so a larger city on the south side of France. And we took a bus for maybe an hour and 15 minutes to Vingros, small village just at the foothills of the Pyrenees. And that's where we started. So we climbed through the vineyards in Vingros and ended up at the first castle, which is the castle of Aguilar, the Chateau of Aguilar. Mostly in ruins, that one. It was a small castle, but it was a first one, so it was fun to see it.
Yeah.
And then we hiked down into the village of Tuchan, Tuchan. And we had a late lunch there. I think we got there around 2:00. And again, it was one of those where most of the restaurants were closed. And finally, we found this cafe that was open. The people were very friendly. We got there. We were tired. We were especially thirsty.
Yeah.
And they just kept bringing water. So it was very nice, And the lady brought us a pitcher of water, which I think we finished in 30 seconds. And then she brought another one. And then finally, she just brought two.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was fun. And then we hiked after lunch to a smaller village called Padern, a little bit further away. And that's where the first inn was. So we stayed in Padern for the night. We were the only ones in the inn. There was nobody around, so it was quite empty, but we were tired, so it was good to have the place to ourselves.
So let me ask you, what sort of hiking trails are these, and how well marked are they? Did you have any difficulty finding the trail at any time?
Absolutely not. The trail system is fantastic. The markings are great. Especially on the GR, the Grand Randonnées, they have the red and white marks painted everywhere, every 100 feet or so. It's really easy to find your way. Plus, we had a GPS, so of course we were cheating a little bit. But no, the markings were really good. The trail mostly is rocky, very rocky. In some areas, it's wide. In most areas, it's fairly narrow. So it is a good trail, but it's a very rocky trail. So it's not like walking in a park. Definitely not.
Yeah. Did you have walking sticks?
Yes, we did. Yeah, I would say that's really important, especially when you're in the hills and the mountains.
Yeah. How much water did you have to carry with you?
So the goal is usually to have about 1 liter of water. And since we were in places where there were villages on a regular basis, so that was enough. And, the first day was a little bit warm, but after that, it was not too warm. So I don't think we ran out of water at any time.
That's good that it's well marked, because that's always a worry. So you mentioned that you had a GPS. Did you have is there an app specifically for this trail?
Not specifically for that trail, but there are apps where you can have access to all the trail system in Europe or even in North America. So we were using an app called Komoot, Komoot. So Komoot is really good for that. I also have access to another app, but Komoot was good enough.
So you had data on your trip. You had bought some sort of package to be able to connect to the internet?
Well, yeah, now that you mentioned that was maybe the second minor issue. I had bought an eSIM card for my phone, and for some reason that was not working. Maybe that was an issue with my phone, I think, with the phone plan I had in the US. So I ended up at least using the Verizon International plan, which is very expensive. So I don't recommend doing that. It's like $10 a day. So next time I go to Europe, I'm going to have to do a little bit more homework about eSIM cards.
Yeah, because most people say that the eSIMs work very well.
I think my phone wasn't locked.
Oh, well, yeah, that would do it.
I need to figure out what to do with that.
Yeah, recently I ran into a problem with my phone at home, and I needed to change. My iPhone kept on saying, no SIM card. I'm like, what? There is a SIM card. So, I removed it, cleaned it off, put it back in. still was complaining about no SIM card. So my husband went to get me a new SIM card one day, and they offered an eSIM instead of the SIM. So I think more and more the providers are going to go to eSIM even for your home plan, which, might be a smart way to go.
But other than that, yeah, we had very good reception. I mean, 5G most of the time on the trail in the mountains. So yeah, no problem.
That's really good. And did the weather cooperate?
Mostly, yeah. Our second day, we had quite a bit of rain. And then on our last day on the trail, we had a little bit of rain. But other than that, yeah, the weather was good. It was, as I said, the first day was a little bit hot. Not terrible, but just a little bit. And then the other days were milder. So very, very pleasant to walk. And that was part of the reason for going in May and June, was to avoid, obviously, July and August, which can be brutal.
And this year, it turns out that May and June were a little rainier than average. Okay. And September and October were all drier than average. So I don't know if this trend is going to continue, obviously. But from mid of June until just a week ago, we virtually got no rain at all over most of France. And so that's really strange. I mean, that's just, we normally get some, especially in September and October, but this year, none. So perhaps it would also, what I'm trying to say is September and October would also be a good time to walk this, I think.
Absolutely. I think that's what a lot of people try to do, is to walk in May or in September and try to avoid the very hot months.
Yeah. Did you run into a lot of, so you mentioned that in your first there you were the only people. Did you run into a lot of other people on the trail?
It was a bit surprising. So I think, I could count maybe 10 or 12 people we ran into over 6 days. So it was definitely not as busy as expected.
Did you ever have to walk on roads or things like that?
Just a little bit. On one of the days, I think we walked maybe about 3 or 4 kilometers on a road. Partially was our fault. We wanted to see a site, and basically we had to take a little detour to get there. But mostly the trails were really in nature. They were away from the main roads. So that was very pleasant.
Not a lot of bikers.
I mean, the trails, I don't think were really designed for bikers, but we saw some bikers on the roads, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Sorry, I interrupted your description of the first day. I apologize. So you started in Vingros and you went to Paderne, right?
Correct.
Right. And visited the Château d'Aguilar, which is near Touchant. Okay.
Touchant. And then Paderne was mostly quiet, I would say. It was not very busy. I think it was a Tuesday night, so maybe that was part of it. So the next morning, we left Paderne. We climbed up. There's a small castle in Paderne, so we just went to see that. But that was a very, very small one, so it was just a small detour. And then we hiked all the way to the first real big castle, which is Quéribus. So that was a pretty long hike, mostly up all the way, but the scenery was really nice, really gorgeous. That was probably that hike from Paderne to Quéribus was the best part of the hike overall. It was just gorgeous. I mean, there were some other sections that were gorgeous too, but that one was really nice. And at some point you turn a corner and you see the Quéribus castle in front of you. It's in the distance, but it's just quite a sight to see.
Yeah.
So we went to Quéribus and visited. Quéribus is really nice. It's quite compact. It's not as big as some of the other castles, but it's well preserved mostly. I mean, these castles are mostly in ruins. They're not like the castles on the Loire River near Paris. So just to give, it's not the same deal.
No. These were defensive castles from the early-ish Middle Ages and and they're not maintained. Most of them were not maintained very well. So they are in various degree of ruin.
But Quéribus was really nice. Actually, it was kind of funny. We ran into some Americans in Quéribus. So it interesting. You're in the middle of nowhere in France, or what seems to be like in the middle of nowhere. And suddenly there are Americans there.
Yeah. They go everywhere, these people.
They go everywhere.
Well, yeah. And honestly, for French families, they mostly will go to these places on the weekend because they have to work, weekdays. So if I'm following this right, this is a Wednesday. So perhaps on a Wednesday afternoon, there could have been some parents taking their kids to the chateau. But
there was a lot of Dutch people.
Is that right?
Yes. All wearing orange.
Why?
Well, that's their color, isn't it?
Oh, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know.
So Kiribati is where we got caught in the rain. So basically, there was a little sort of shelter area where the cash register was to get into the castle. They had a little shop there. So anyway, there was a little shelter. So we were waiting for the rain to stop. In fact, we didn't have any food. So it was like 1:00, 1:15. And the lady who ran the cash register at the castle said, my shift ends at 1:30. So if you want to wait, I'll give you a ride into town. And we're going like, okay. Sure, why not?
That's very nice.
So, yes, because it was a good 3-5 kilometers downhill to the next village. So she gave us a ride, and in fact, afterwards we ran into some of the people who were at the shelter, and they had fell, on the trail because it was so muddy and slippery. It was pouring rain.
Very slippery. Yes, this kind of stone. If it's wet, you really need to hang on to your poles and use them.
It's dangerous.
Yes, it can be dangerous. Yes.
So that was our little cheating, I guess. We took a car for a few kilometers. But
well, nice person to offer you a ride.
She was very nice, yes. And that was kind of my take-home message. There was nice people everywhere and very friendly, very willing to help with finding restaurants and things like that.
So you got into Cucugnan a little bit late. You still found food?
We found, again, just the one restaurant that was open.
Yeah, well, yeah.
We start to see the trend, but that one was also interesting because it was very full and we're wet. We've got our rain jackets, we got our backpacks, and the place is full. They have some groups, and I'm thinking, they're not going to be very happy to see us, But no, they were very, the lady said, just give me a few minutes, I'll find you a table. And she found us a table, and they were very friendly, and they got us food. And then the rain eventually stopped, so we were able to then get back on the trail because our stop was the next village over, Duilac. So after that, it went very well. The rain came to an end.
All right. So then you hiked to Duilac. How far was it?
It was maybe 5 or 6 kilometers from Cucugnan. It was not too bad. And that was mostly flat at that point. Which was good because by then we were a little tired. We'd been rained on. It was a good way to end the day.
Yeah, yeah. And once you got to the gîte there in Duilac, what do you do? I mean, these are not villages where there's very much, right?
Right. So, I mean, there's a couple things you have to do. The first one is you have to do a little bit of laundry because when you travel like this, you're not traveling with a lot of clothes. So every 2 nights or so, you have to do a little bit of, you have to wash your clothes, take a shower and look nice. And then you start to look for food. So either a grocery or a restaurant that might be open. So in our case, we're mostly looking for restaurants. So basically, by the time you've done all of this, it's 8 or 9 o'clock. You sit around a little bit to chat, and it's time to go to bed and get ready for the next day. Time goes by very, very quickly.
Yeah. So you didn't run into a lot of other hikers. This is different from the people who do the Camino, the Compostelle. Even on the French side, in May, you would run into quite a few people, I think.
I think so, yeah. The gîtes would be very busy. Now, the gîte in Duilac was, I would say, reasonably busy. There were maybe 6 or 7 of us. So most of the people we saw on the trail were actually in Duilac. But you're right. If you do one of the Caminos in France, I think they have dorms maybe with 20 or so people. And then if you go to Spain, I think those are the big dorms with
even more,
100, 200 people.
And most of these gîtes, places like that, did you have to bring anything besides yourselves? I mean, did you have to bring your own sheets, things like that?
No, you can if you want, but we booked, you have to pay extra for the sheets, but we booked that ahead of time. We wanted to make sure, we were trying to travel as light as possible. So we wanted to make sure we had beddings essentially in all those places. So we did. You have to pay like an extra €5 in most places, and then they'll get you a pillowcase and some sheets and things like that. But a lot of people will travel with a light sleeping bag, which is something we considered, we thought about it, but then that was, you try to shed as many pounds as you can. That's something that we were able not to have to worry about that.
Yeah. How big were your backpacks?
Less than 20 pounds. Yeah. With water, just about 20 pounds, roughly.
That's really good.
Oh, yeah, that's your goal. You want to be less than 20 pounds. So the rule of the thumb is you have to be less than 10% of your body weight. And people will argue about that, 10, 15%, things like that. But yeah, 20 pounds was good. You have to realize, you're walking every day, 5, 6, 7 hours a day. So the pounds do add up after a while.
Yeah, definitely. What was the comfort level in those inns? I like it a bit plush. I'm assuming it's not very plush.
It's not very plush.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have the best mattresses. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so thin mattresses, perhaps a bit hard.
Yeah, and they've been used before. But, some of those places you pay 25 euros a night or 30 euros a night. So you can't expect too much.
Yeah.
We had two bed and breakfasts that were definitely several notches above that. Those were really nice. But the inns that are made specifically for hikers, it's very basic comfort, but you have a roof, you have a shower, you have a place to sit and cook if you want. So it's quite nice. You can't complain too much for, as I said, 30 euros a night.
Did you have a lot of choices as far as where you spent the night, or was it just the one place there and that's it?
Right. You don't have in some of the places there may be a couple, but mostly when you go from one village to the next, there's one place in each village. So in fact, your path is a little bit guided or, based on where the accommodations are. So there's not like one every 5 kilometers. So you really have to go where you can find one.
So I found a website that looked interesting to me. It's sentiercathare.fr, because it starts at Port-la-Nouvelle, and then it gives you, like, on the left side, it gives you the distance between all of these things. And it gives you the name of the accommodations, some phone numbers. Sometimes it says whether they speak English or not. I think that's where I would start if I was trying to arrange a thing like this. Because, and obviously, like in Port-la-Nouvelle, you have a bunch of choices. It's a tourist town. But as you go along, there's fewer and fewer. You have this one place. But then you can kind of decide, I want to walk 10K or 20K or whatever it is. So I think that site is done pretty well. How did you pick? I mean, I want to know how you sat down and organized this.
So I actually bought a guidebook. So the Fédération Française de Randonnée Pédestre, so the French sort of organization for all these hiking trails, they publish those really good guidebooks, and they're not very big. They're, very thin. So I bought one of those, and it sounds a little bit like your website. It goes, town by town with the inns and the hostels and the distances and things like that. So that's kind of what I use. And then obviously the internet to kind of narrow down in some cases where to go exactly. But that guidebook was definitely my Bible on the trail, or at least to plan the trail.
Right. Did you give me a link to it in your notes?
Perhaps? I don't think so. I can do that afterwards.
Yeah, perhaps you should do that so people know exactly which one you use, because there's a lot of different books about this path and several websites. So did you call them ahead? Did you book everything before you arrived, like the week before or whatever?
Yeah, we booked everything ahead just by sending some emails. People were quite good about responding to emails. I think one site actually was through the booking.com website. One bed and breakfast was through that website, but everything else was just by email. I didn't call because from North America, it's always a little bit complicated to call France or Europe.
Yeah, the time difference, yeah.
But emailing was fine.
All right, so we left off in Duyac, and from there you went to
Château de Pertuis Castle, number 2. So we actually spent 2 nights in Duyac. Yes, it goes up and up. So for those of you who've never seen pictures of that castle, it is on a ridge. It's about 800 meters above the town of Duyac. And that's why we stayed in Duyac 2 nights, because we really wanted to take our time to go to that castle. And it took essentially half a day to do the whole trip. But it's a fantastic site. The entire castle is like 300 meters in length, so about 900 feet. I could compare it to sort of a big ship that's sitting on top of a ridge, on top of a mountain. You feel like you're on the Titanic or something. And it's spectacular. It's definitely, that was my favorite. It's in ruin. I mean, you don't see much as far as structures. There's some walls left, a little bit of a couple towers, things like that. But just a sight. It's just amazing. And when you're at the bottom, actually, it's kind of hard to see the castle because it looks like it's part of the rock formation.
A lot of these kind of melt into the rock unless you know exactly what you're looking for. And that was the idea, was to not give away the location of the castle.
But yeah, it was just a fantastic sight. Quite a climb to go up there, especially when you start from town. So we climbed up, and I don't remember, we might have had lunch at the top. Maybe we did, but then we climbed down and came back into town afterwards. And then in the afternoon, we went for a shorter hike to a small sort of waterfall pool area. And that was close to town, a gorge area. So that was nice. That was an easy, very easy hike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, by comparison. So most of these places where you were staying, could you leave your stuff there, or did you have to, like if you were going for an afternoon quick hike, could you leave your stuff at the gîte or wherever you were staying?
Yeah, you could leave it there. So that was not a problem. And it's pretty safe. Plus, we don't have anything really of any value. I mean, we had day packs, so things like passports, things like that, we always carried with us. But other than that, it was perfectly safe to leave your dirty clothes at the inn.
Yeah. I assume you had your phone, perhaps an extra battery pack for your phone.
Yes.
That's just standard travel stuff. Yes. So Père-Perthuse is the name of it. It's
a mouthful.
Yes, it is spectacular. I saw that they have a car charger at the bottom, so now I have to go do it. But the last time I was there, I got there at like 5:45, and they were about to close because there is a fee to go up that one. There's a bathroom at the bottom.
Yeah, at least the big castles, they charge maybe €7, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's really worth it. It's absolutely worth it.
Sure. It's good to have somebody keep an eye on the place because decades ago, when I was a youngin in this area, because I grew up in this area, people would just hike up these things and have parties and whatever. And not so good.
They have small exhibits and they have a shop, and most of them you can buy a sandwich or a coffee or something like that. So it's quite nice.
Yeah. Did you run into any services, people offering to take you to a different spot, or taxi services for people who didn't want to carry anything, I guess?
As far as when you're hiking?
Yes.
There are services like that, but we decided not to use that.
I know there are most places. So if you're into that, you need to call them or email them and see if they can recommend someone who does this in that particular town.
I know that's very popular on the Caminos. You can certainly hike and get all your luggage transported from one inn to the next. But yeah, I think you're right. I think on the Cathare's way, you can do that as well. But it can get very expensive. I think they charge like €40 per day, something like that.
Mm-hmm. There's a service called La Malle Postale. That's what they do. And you can arrange from anywhere to anywhere. I don't know how they manage to have people all over, but apparently they do.
Yeah, I think maybe on the busier trails, maybe that's worth it.
All right. So then you went to Père-Perthuse, then you hiked to the Gorge du Verdouble. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the small waterfall, the pool area. There were a few people swimming there. So that's just maybe 4 or 5 kilometers from Druillac, and it's sort of a local place for people to go swimming or just go for a picnic. And it was just pleasant. It was just an afternoon walk. We wanted to do something easy in the afternoon. And just a nice gorge.
Mostly flat, you said.
Yeah, mostly flat. It was nothing spectacular, but it was, it was nice.
Fantastic. And you met several other hikers, all French. Okay, very good. Tell us about day 4.
So day 4 was, we left Druillac. That was definitely our most strenuous day 4. So we went from Druillac, and our goal was to reach Camps. I think you pronounce that Camps with the S, Camps.
I would say Camps sur l'Agly, but I'm not sure. Camps sur l'Agly.
So we took the southern route at this point and even ended up on a different JR, the 36, for a while, because we wanted to go see the gorges of Galamus. So Galamu, it's a canyon. I mean, it's not a Grand Canyon, but it's a very nice canyon. It's fairly big, and we wanted to see that. So we had to climb up through a mountain to go down into a different valley to get there. So that was quite a hike that day, very rocky trail. In fact, we encountered some cows that were hiking along the trail with us. So that was kind of funny.
Oh, cows are no dummy. They take trails. They take roads. Yeah.
In fact, I've got a little video of a cow climbing the trail in front of me. But anyway, so we went up and down and finally made it into that big gorge, the gorges of Galamus. And there's a hermitage in the gorge that's built in the rock. And that's very nice. It's not big, but it's a very nice area. I forget how long ago it was built, but 500-600 years ago, something like that. And they have a small shop there, a small cafe.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that was very nice. And then we climbed out of the gorge back onto the Sentier Cathare and eventually reached the next inn, which was more of a bed and breakfast in this case. But that was a long day for us. That was 23 kilometers with lots of ups and downs. It's on that day that we did a little bit of road walking because with the gorges, there's no trail for part of it. You have to walk on the road that goes through the gorges. So we were very tired. By the time we got to the inn, the bed and breakfast, that was definitely a very difficult.
More tiring than Père Pertus, I can't even imagine.
Yeah. For a different reason, I think, but it was a longer day. I think that was the main thing.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. So I don't remember if you sent me a photo of this, but I'll be looking through your photos to see if I can see what it looks like because I've never been there. I'm quite sure I've never been there.
Yeah, I would recommend it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. Day 5.
So day 5 was again crossing a mountain to go into a different valley. So this time we were in Camp de l'Agly and we had to cross into, I think you pronounce that Caudiès de Fenouillède.
Let me see. Caudiès de
Fenouillède. So we had to basically cross a mountain into the next valley where Caudiès was located. We ran into some horses. So the day before was cows. That day was horses, some wild horses on the trail.
Nice.
It was very nice. It was quite interesting. At first, we just couldn't believe it. But then there were maybe a dozen different horses there on the trail.
Huh.
I assumed they belonged to someone, but there was no sign of anyone around.
Well, horses are pretty smart. I've known people who have horses that just go in the mountains and they come back whenever the weather is not to their liking or they're very hungry or very thirsty. They come home when they need to. Independent horses.
But on that day, we had a great view of the peak of Bucarache. So Bucarache is quite a sight. It's this big rocky mountain right there. And that's where New Age people go. And I guess they went there, I think it was in 2012, expecting the end of the world. And in any case, it's kind of a touristic attraction for that reason.
We love to go places where the end of the world did not take place.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of them by now.
So eventually we reached the town of Caudiès. It's lunchtime. So as usual, most restaurants are closed except for one. We found this little cafe that didn't look like, it was more like a bar, in fact. So it didn't look like much from the outside, but the owner, the manager was, again, very welcoming. He said, yeah, we serve food because we said we don't, we're just looking for food. And so he brought us into the back, and in fact, we had a great lunch there. It was one of our best meals of the trip at this little bar in the town of Caudiès. Served like a curry with very nice vegetables. So it was quite nice.
Good.
And then from there, we went through a few more villages, saw some churches, and eventually reached our inn for the night. That one was really interesting. That was a farmhouse, literally in the middle of nowhere. We had to walk on a dirt road for maybe 6-7 kilometers to get there. And it was an active farm. They had 45 cows. Lady there was extremely friendly, very, very friendly. Colette, she was from near Lyon, I think. She talked to me a little bit about that. I think Valence, maybe. But she and her husband had been operating this farm since the 80s or 90s. I don't remember. I think she was looking forward to retirement, but she still enjoyed the farm and being an innkeeper. What was also very interesting at that inn is we ran into 4 Americans who were on horseback. So they were touring they were kind of doing the same circuit we were doing, but in the opposite direction. And of course, they were on horses. We were walking, they were on horses. I guess there are places like that that will rent horses.
Oh,
They give you tour guides and all the information. And anyway, they were on horses. So we spent the night, had dinner with them. That was a very pleasant evening. Colette made some steaks, so that was very good. And yeah, that's very, very pleasant evening.
that's great. When you run into people like that, they're very dedicated to what they do.
She was.
Farmers and innkeepers. Clearly, they're not doing it to make a million,
Oh, no, I'm sure she's not getting rich out of.
Yeah. They just enjoy their everyday life and their animals and their lifestyle, I guess.
And she told me, she wants to retire. I guess she's getting to the age where she's ready for that. But she doesn't want to just get rid of the farm. She wants to make sure she finds the right person to own the farm and maybe continue the inn. And so I thought that was very nice. She obviously thinks about the future. She likes what she's built, with this farm and the inn.
Well, yeah, you build a business kind of. You want it to continue. It's even if it's a small, very small business that serves just a few people who are coming through. To her, it's her life.
It's her life, yeah. She, as I said, she's been doing this for, I think, 30, maybe 40 years.
Very nice. Very nice. And then let's talk about your day 6, which is, we have several more days to talk about. Let's go. Let's go. Day 6.
Well, day 6 was the last day on the trail. So if we want to focus on the trail, that's our last day on the trail. So we were near Puy-Laurence. That farm was a little bit outside of town. So we walked to the village of Puy-Laurence to buy a little bit of food. We were out of food. Every day you try to have like sausage and cheese and maybe a baguette or something in case you don't have a restaurant for lunch. We were definitely out of food at that point. We made a detour to town, got some supplies, and then we walked to our last big castle, our last castle, in fact, which was the chateau, the castle of Puy-Laurence, which is probably the best preserved castle on the trail, at least of the ones that we've seen. And that one is also on a ridge, it's up there, very well preserved as far as the Cathare's castles are. So that was also interesting, very nice views, very scenic like the other ones. We weren't there at the right time, but in the summer, they told us they have like a little feast there. They bring activities, crafts and vendors for this and that. So, I think that seems to be fairly touristic. And then we left the castle and got a little bit of rain that day and made it to the town of Axat. So Axat with the T that you pronounce, we learned that.
Yes, I know this one. So this one I know for a fact it's Axat, yes.
And so that was our final destination on the trail. Very pleasant city, little town. I really enjoyed the River Aude goes through the city. So it's quite nice, very scenic. Mm-hmm. And we had a very nice bed and breakfast there.
Yeah, that one probably has more accommodations. I mean, a few anyway.
Yeah, there was a hotel which actually amazingly was fully booked. But yeah, I know. It's like, I don't know who's in town, but
perhaps somebody was getting married or something. That's what happens in these little towns is if somebody's having a party for whatever, like when my brother, he has a house not very far from Axat. And when we go for New Year's Eve, for instance, we fill up all the inns around. And so you'd be like, who's coming here? Because he can't, if he's throwing a big party, not everybody can sleep at his house. Sure. It's too, so we all fill the little inn not too far. So that's why it happens. That is full.
So Axat was very pleasant. We walked along the river for a while and then found a little pizza place for dinner. And again, had a nice dinner with the locals. It was one of those places where they just had picnic tables on the sidewalk. It was kind of fun. Those little towns, you feel like it's not like you get to know the locals, but you get to see a little bit of their lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think Axat is one that has the pizzeria is a food truck, right? It's a little truck on the side of the road, no?
No, it was on that main street there.
Okay.
It's just a little hole in the wall, like we say in the U.S.
What kind of advice do you have for people who want to do this? What would you tell them?
Well, certainly if you haven't done a lot of hiking, you should definitely get in shape. And I do that myself. If I'm going to do a big trip like that, several months ahead of time, I'm going to try to have a schedule, 3 times a week. I need to walk so many miles. And then as we get closer to the trip, I'll go to state parks and things like that with my backpack and just practice and do some ups and downs with 20 or 25 pounds on my back.
Yeah.
So really plan that well, the physical aspect, because if you're not in shape, you're going to suffer and then your trip is not going to be fun. You got to think about your footwear. It's really, really important to have the right hiking shoes. And then you don't want brand new shoes when you start on a trip like this. So you want to make sure you wear them for several months. So you break them in and make sure that you're comfortable with your footwear. That's probably the most important thing. Your
One pair
footwear.
of socks or 2 pairs of socks?
I usually just wear one.
Okay.
So yeah, I know there's debates about that, but I have very good hiking socks and I just wear one pair.
Yeah. Did you get any major, like, were your feet in trouble at some point or were they fine?
I had some blisters. I mean, it's hard to avoid that. At least in my case, I always get blisters, but nothing too serious nothing that was extremely painful. But yeah, usually you tape them or use moleskin, things like that. So I would say, yeah, the physical part is really important. The second is obviously plan the trip. Make sure you know what you're getting into. Make sure that you have places to stay. Some people like to hike and not book things in advance, and that's fine. But then if you do that, then you have to make sure there's several options in front of you because you might run out.
You might be surprised.
You might be surprised. So otherwise, in my opinion, it's better to book ahead of time and then to make sure that you're going to a place where you'll be able to do that every 10 to 15 miles, every 15 to 20 kilometers, 25 kilometers. So there's a little bit of planning to be done. And if you go to one of those GRs like the Sentier Cathare, usually there are places like that along the way. That's why they're designated, GRs. The planning is important, very important. And then be flexible. You never know what's going to happen, even with the best planning.
You mentioned that you can get baguettes from vending machines.
Oh, yeah.
In those villages, yes.
Yes. I posted one of those pictures on my Facebook site, just for my friends back home. It's like, look, we can get baguettes here from the vending machine.
Yeah.
Because we often joke that it's hard to find a baguette sometimes here, or at least a good one.
Oh, in France, you're never too far from one. You might have to wait until they open, though. That's the thing. They're not open constantly. And that's usually the limitation of these places is that it's one person running it, perhaps a couple, perhaps, and they're not going to work constantly, like, obviously.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was really, really interesting.
Thank you.
I'm sure lots of people want to do this. I think that's a great way to explore a country, like to see France, to see the rural places that people say they want to go to. But do they really go to them? Some do. And it's interesting that you can do it on a horse as well. I wasn't aware of that.
And some people do it by bike. So I think it's good to travel that way. Obviously, it's not for everyone, but it's a way to really experience both the terrain and meeting people along the way. So I enjoy doing that.
And who do you recommend this for? What kind of people? Like what age range? Are there people that should not do this other than people who are completely out of shape?
Right. I don't think so. I mean, I've seen people on trails that were in their 70s. So I think, people can do that up to a point when they're older. You just have to pace yourself, maybe do shorter trips or maybe trails are not as strenuous. But obviously, I would say the majority of people are middle age. You see some younger people, but it's mainly people my age, I guess, that you encounter on trips like this. I think for people who really want to experience, as you said, the countryside, meet people along the way, you're not going to go into big cities. So if you want to see museums and the major sites, and maybe that's not the kind of travel that you want to do. But if you want to experience France, what I would say the real France, that's a great way to do it.
La France profonde.
Yeah, and the deep France.
Thank you very much, Christian.
Thank you very much, Annie.
I hope you continue to have wonderful adventures.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Au revoir. Again, I want to thank my patrons for giving back and supporting this show. Patrons get several exclusive rewards. For doing so, you can see them at patreon.com/join us. That's Patreon. Join us, no spaces or dashes. Thank you all for supporting the show. Some of you have been doing it for a long time. You are wonderful. And a shout out this week to new patrons, Scott Bradley, April Abate Adams, who I think is the one I met in Utah. Hello to you, even if you're not the one I met in Utah. I'm terrible with names, I'm sorry. Barbara Wolf also. Wonderful to have you on board in the community of Francophiles who help this podcast going. And to join them and join me in the community, go to patreon.com/join us. And to support Elise, go to patreon.com/Elise Art, ELYSART. Patrons got the first installment in a new series I'm calling Casual Convos with Annie and Elise. We'll do one a month or so, and we chit-chat about our lives, our projects, our visits, the things that are occupying our minds, what we're reading, what we're cooking, things like that. It's not scripted, obviously. It's just a chit-chat. The Casual Convos go to both mine and Elise's patrons, and my patrons will also get monthly Zoom meetings for the February Zoom in the next couple of days, and I look forward to talking to you live, where you can actually talk back. Thank you for your one-time donation. Paula Parks Fitzhugh. You also bought several of my audio tours in the Join Us in France boutique, which means that you got the listener discount, and who does not love a discount? If you'd like to support the podcast but don't want to sign up for Patreon, go to joinusinfrance.com and click on any of the green buttons that say Tip Your Guide. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful time in Paris. Paula. And I'm not going to explain the itinerary planning service again. There are 2 levels, Bonjour and VIP. To read all about it, go to the boutique. You know where it is. Okay, I posted this about favorite cities in France for French people. I posted it on Facebook, and it got lots of reactions, including one from Diane Bach that found what I thought was a secret sauce for the ranking, which is not so secret after all. But it was well hidden. So how did they come up with this ranking? There are 187 criteria divided into 11 categories, and I'll just give you the main categories. Quality of life, security, finance and local taxes, health, transport, shopping and services, environmental protection and education, solidarity, sports and leisure, and real estate situation. I'll put a link to the whole study in the show notes for those of you who want the details. It's all in French. It's a PDF. It's all in French. All right, so what are these wonderful towns where we all want to live? Well, the surprise is that Paris is very far down the list, and so are most towns in Provence, very far down the list. So there you have it. Toulouse is also quite far down the list, by the way. Not quite as far as Paris, but it is far down the list. So let's see. The top 5 are Angers, so that's in the Maine-et-Loire, so that's a little west and south of Paris. Bayonne, that's in the Basque Country. Biarritz, in the Basque Country. Anglet, in the Basque Country. Well, everybody wants to live in the Basque Country. Annecy, which is in Haute-Savoie, which is also a very highly praised visitors' tourist town kind of thing. So these are the first 5. And then the ones below are a little surprising. Lorient in the Morbihan, which to me sounds like it rains all the time. Like that's what I have in my head. Rennes, same. It's in Brittany. I think of it as a place where it rains all the time, but probably that's not true, or perhaps people don't care. La Rochelle is number 8. Brest is number 9, which is amazing. Also, like, really windy and cold. Why do people want to live there? And then number 10 is Rodez in the Aveyron, which is the only one that makes the top 10 list from my fair region, the Occitanie region. So congratulations to the 10 cities. It's very clear that people would like to live in the west of France, where the weather is perhaps not as hot, but apparently they also have very good quality of life, security, finance. You know, they have money. Local taxis are not too bad. There's plenty of health services, good transportation. They have good shopping. They have good environmental protection, good education, although the education in France is national. So you don't really, it's not going to make a huge difference. It's more of a difference of what teacher your kids get than anything else. Solidarity is a great one to look at because it is my opinion, and I think a lot of French people's opinion, that I'm better off if there are not too many people struggling in life. If there are ways to help the people who are struggling, I'm not sure why they're struggling, but there we are. They are struggling. My life is better if we help them. Sports and leisure are really important, as well as real estate. And I'm sure that real estate prices in Bayonne, Biarritz, Angers, Annecy are very, very expensive, as well as Angers. Although I don't really know Angers that well. So, I'm going to go visit all of these towns. I just want to see for myself what it is that is so fabulous as far as French people are concerned. I understand Rodez in the Aveyron because the Aveyron is a part of France that does not get talked about enough. It is so beautiful. The weather is a bit rough, though. It's one of those parts of France where it really freezes, like hard freezes, which as I get older, I don't take that so much. So I'll stop gabbing and just read you the next 10, and then I'll stop. I'll let you look at them yourself. Caen in the Calvados, so that's again the west of France. Le Mans, where the car race takes place, is on number 12. Nice, finally something in Provence. Nice is number 13. Cherbourg-en-Cotentin, so that's in the Manche. They might as well be in England. This one. Pau, number 15. So that's in the Pyrenees. It's in the Bordeaux area, I guess. La Roche-sur-Yon, again, that's the west of France, in the Vendée. Lannion, Côte d'Armor. Saint-Brieuc, Côte d'Armor. Now we have Strasbourg in the very far east of France, and Le Havre, which is very north of France. So really, really interesting to see the result here. And let me search for Paris to see how far down Paris is. So Paris is at number 103 in this ranking, and Toulouse is at number 63. So yeah, there are a lot of things to think about when you're moving somewhere, but in my case, I was born in Toulouse. That's why I wanted to come back. My siblings are there, my parents were there, and so that's what it matters to me. But if you're just going to look for a place to live, I think finding a place where quality of life is high and where, you can get a lot of enjoyment from everything, your surroundings, everything like that is fantastic. And I'll put this in the show notes for the episode. My thanks to podcast editors Anne and Christian Chauret, who produced the audio and edit the transcript. Next week on the podcast, an episode with Elise about Simone Veil, an amazing, amazing trailblazer in French politics and a woman that we don't talk about often enough because she really made a huge difference in French life. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join me next time so we can look around France together. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2024 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.